We are live, but you know what we got to do before we go live? We got to play that introduction music. So let's go, people. Let's go. Let's go. I just love that. So I have to play it. So welcome to Sipping Tea with Sabrina. In just a second, we're going to be sharing the tea on transformative leadership, cultivating growth and excellence in nonprofits. But if you've never met me before, I'm Sabrina, the founder of Supporting World's Hope, LLC, a coaching and consulting company I started after 25 years in the nonprofit industry. I'm coming up on 30 years, y'all. It's actually been 28 years. I can't believe it. I train CEOs, board of directors, and employees across diverse sectors in leadership skills, focusing on revenue, relationships, and retention. I'm a keynote speaker, facilitator, coach, author, and strategic planning expert. And we have with us today, Kishshana Palmer with Management Inc. So I'm going to bring Kishshana to the stage because I'm so excited to have her here. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sabrina, I just have to grab all of your excitement and energy. You know we officially go together. I just want you to know. Hi, friends. I'm Kishshana Palmer. I live now here in Atlanta, but I am a New Yorker, born and raised. Let's see. So I've been in the nonprofit sector and around it probably about 25 years as well. Look, we have some good skin, don't we? And the thing that I have always cared about most is making sure that we are well so that we can lead well, particularly for folks who look like me. And that is because we go from grand opening to grand closing. And I have a rising sophomore now in college, and I do not want her to continue to believe that the only way to win is to work yourself to death. And that shows up at home and it shows up at work in our organization. So I'm so happy to be able to be here and share time and space with you.
Yes, this is awesome. So this conversation is critical to those wanting to understand transformative leadership and use it to cultivate growth and self-care and excellence. Whether you are a nonprofit, mission-driven company, or an association, that's why we have Ms. Palmer with us. So I have a set of questions that I am going to ask you right now. I am going to lay it out for you. We are currently streaming, so as we're talking, some other questions might come up. I just want you to know that, okay? I don't want to take you by surprise, but I love the area that you specialize in. So, like you said, a lot of times we struggle with that. So some things might come up. So the first question is, can you share a defining moment or experience in your career that shaped your perspective on transformative leadership within nonprofits?
So this might be a little bit different than most people might expect. A defining moment for me was when a team member that I had to let go invited me to her wedding. And you might be saying, okay, well, why is that important? Well, we know, and if you don't know now, you know, that more times than not, our team members do not leave the role. They don't leave the organization. They leave us. 70% of our team's success depends on us. So if we don't have any act right, they're going to go. So imagine the light bulb that went off in my head, Sabrina, when I said, well, I must be doing something right, because when you have to put somebody on a performance improvement plan or a PIP, and then you have to help them find happiness at another organization, and then a couple of years later, they invite you to their wedding. Hello. That means you honored them. You did that. You gave them grace. You let them move on powerfully. And you did not give them post-traumatic stress in the workplace, which tons of us are living with that in our body every day. So that was my defining moment.
That's very interesting, because I've had to let people go And it didn't turn out so well. So this is one of those times where it comes up again. So what did you do in that moment? How did you allow them to end in that grace?
So one of the things my client says to me a couple of months ago, she said that she imagines me as a corporate raider who gets invited to baby showers and weddings. And I said, actually, no, I don't know where it came from. So what did I do differently? Number one, I start with, where are you in this season of your life? And at that time, this was years ago, I didn't have the language yet. I just had the instinct. What's going on in your life right now? Because that allows me to be able to see, as a leader, is this episodic? Is this skill, or is this will? For her, it was episodic. She'd had a parent that had passed away, and coming into the role, I said, I'm not really sure this is a great idea. And I have to work. Okay. And so I gave her a lot longer runway and more support because of the life experience that she had just had, that big life change. So what I do as a manager for every single person who walks alongside me in their career is start with, what you got going on at the house? Maybe it's because I'm a first-gen American, come from a big West Indian family, have had that immigrant experience. And so I know what it's like to Western Union money home. I know what it's like. Your paycheck doesn't go to you. It has to go to this one and auntie this one and cousin that one. So I understand that there's an undercurrent and sometimes a riptide of life that is happening for our team members. And my responsibility as a manager has always been to have a personal relationship with my team, not necessarily a private relationship with my team. So I understand what's going on. So I know that Kathy takes care of her grandmother and she has 2 young kids at the house. But I may not know that Kathy's grandmother has dementia, that has deteriorated, that has done But when Kathy has to be out of the office and she says for my grandmother, I don't even ask any questions because I know she's in that sandwich generation. You see where I'm going with that?
Right. Yeah.
And that's
you said something very key, a personal relationship, not a private relationship. That was an aha moment for me, because I'm one of those people who struggled with that part of it, because sometimes you get burned by staff, and I struggle with that. That was key. What other skills? I hear empathy, but what are some of the other key attributes or skills that you believe every transformative nonprofit leadership possess?
So I'm going to give you 3 things that I think are important for every nonprofit leader to know and understand. So thing 1, most of us do not understand the difference between skills, talents, and gifts. So skills are the things that we typically learn or acquire. And 80% or more of the time, Kishshana's math, that's what we get hired for. And that's what we look for. And that's what goes on the ticker tape of the 3-page job description, right? But then you go one up. There's talents. Those are things that just come easily to you. So think about my folks who are like math whizzes, or they love the written word, or they can tinker, or they're creatives. Then you get to decide if you want to monetize that or not. And then if you go one up, there are gifts, and those are the things that you are born with. And then you get to decide whether you monetize them or not. The challenge we have, and the challenge that all of us have, is we end up swimming in the skills pool. Yes. And we don't get into the talents, and we for sure do not get into the gifts. And because we're so focused on activating, amplifying our mission, we're so focused on bringing in capital to the organization, we're navigating our boards, we're navigating the business of people, we tend to kind of vibrate kind of low in that skills area. And so I want leaders to understand and to be able to articulate, where are you actually casting that net when you are talking about, thinking about hiring your talent, when you are looking to give folks in your organizations more responsibility, and let's be honest, where you are for certain things that are under your purview in your organization. So that one, to me, biggie.
Yeah. So skills, talents, and gifts.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah. Let me say this for the people who are listening or maybe listening. When you're talking about skills, talent, and gift, Some of them might be saying, well, who has the time to discover someone's talent? I got the skills because when I interviewed, I got that. But who has the time to discover those talents and very well elevate someone to understand what their gifts are?
Yeah. I mean, it's a tough one. So here's what I have done and what I continue to practice. I practice it with the young people who are constantly in my house. This is the first year I have not had the neighborhood drop-in center because I have an only child, as well as young professionals. And then those of us who are more seasoned, right? Who came into the workplace with a keep your head down, work hard, leave home at home, nose to the grindstone till you get to the top. I had to work hard to get here. So what are you going to? So a lot of us have that mentality. Let's be honest. So the way that I have learned to do that is by using assessments to walk alongside my work. So it just so happens that now I'm a Clifton Strengths coach. But years ago when I was in my 20s, I didn't know you could be a coach. But I found this book after I went to a fundraising conference of all things, Sabrina. And I always tell the story. And the session was Finding Your Freak Within. And I said, wait a minute. And so I went in.
Signing up for that one.
I had a new baby at home. I was in my 20s. I said, hold on, let me see. And it was about what would your professional and your personal life look like if you learned to really activate and amplify and accelerate your strengths, and you learn to manage the things that you were not good at. Then weaknesses, now I'll say your blind spots. Yeah. So oftentimes organizations, this in your work, they want to do an assessment. Let's do DISC. Let's do Enneagram. Let's do red light, yellow light, green light. It has a fancy name, but I never can remember it. If you're not folding that into the way you actually think about performance, individual development plans, being able to course correct, being able to see growth and innovation and opportunity within your organization, then it's just a fun exercise you hired us to do and paid us some money for your team members to go, oh, look at me, I'm yellow, and move on. But if leaders are going to invest in tools to help them see and to help their team members kind of see, who am I in the world and how do I show up right now? That's got to be folded into how you operate day to day. So my whole world changed at that moment. I didn't even know what I was doing back then, okay? Yeah. And all I have to say, I'll tell you a quick story. So I was head of development for an organization that was regional. We were taking that organization national. It's the first time I've had this big national job. I had this team. We're all kind of straight out of grad school and undergrad. So we don't know nothing. Okay. And the board said, oh, great. It's our 10 year. So we're going to give you a goal of $300,000 to raise at an event. But here's the thing, Sabrina. This organization had not to that date raised more than $10,000 in any one event.
Wow.
How in the easy breezy would little old me and my team, we don't know nothing, gonna do that? Guess what I did? Pulled out those strengths.
Yep.
Had everybody take, then it was called Strength Finder. Had everybody take Clifton strengths. I put it all on the whiteboard. I took every task we had to do over 12 months and put it on the whiteboard. And I was kind of like, don't tell HR. And just mixed and matched and zigzagged who was better at what based on what their strengths said. Yep. And honey, not only did we hit that $300,000 goal, we hit 850 plus and netted over $700,000. And today it is the organization's most successful marquee event. Now they raise millions of dollars. But can you imagine? Boom! Just leaning into folks' strengths. So that's kind of how I know.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I know when I was CEO, I did the Strength Finder with my team, but just like you're saying, you fall into that trap. Okay, Strength Finders. Now, what do you do with that information? And now the fact that you took it to that next level of actually, we did it so that we could understand each other a little bit better. But to execute it and to put it into place like that, that's really genius.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really genius. And to do that. So here's another question. You're doing the Strength Finders, you're doing the assessments, you're doing all that. What are some of the other challenges or common challenges that nonprofit leaders face when striving for transformative change? And how can they overcome these challenges? I know for me, again, we did the strength finders, but to take it to that next level, I didn't know what I didn't know. What are some of the other challenges that you see?
So one of them I think that's big is something I call martyritis. So many of us, we know we're going to call it, we're workaholics. That's how we brought into this work world. Some of us, think about the folks, and I know we have listeners who school was your safe place.
Yeah.
Guess what becomes your safe place when you get out of school? Or some of us stay in school. Work. So for many leaders, I find that because work is our safe place, we are in control of that we don't want to ask for help. And we don't think anybody else can do it. And to your earlier point, sometimes the people burn you, okay? Don't let somebody do something and mess you up one time. That's it. I'm never doing it again. So then what happens? Sabrina, then we go, well, if I don't write the grant, then it's not going to get written. And in a staff meeting, and then all over the weekend while the rest of you are out enjoying your life, I was up all night, right? And I'm putting a little levity to it, but that's what we do. And because we do that, and we literally take that anvil and put it on our shoulders, and don't be somebody who identifies as a woman. Don't be somebody who identifies as queer. Don't be someone who identifies as a Black woman. Hello?
Yep.
Then anvil on top of ankle. We are tied down. Except we're going, look at me, tied down, toiling. So we miss the opportunity to get peer mentoring, to think, pair, share with other CEOs who do similar work because we think that there's no money. We miss the opportunity to invest in ourselves and in our senior staff through coaching, through having consultants who can walk alongside, because we see it as an expense and not an investment. And because we believe that this toiling is what we are supposed to do in service to the mission, then we are setting the example that if you do not work yourself to the bone and don't ask any questions and don't ask for help and don't, then you're not doing the job right. And then we won't retire.
Yeah.
So we're having that's a nuanced and complex kind of step we're walking, right? So that is generational work, transfer of power and responsibility. Everybody who is in a power position is not a power player. Not being able to ask for help. And then the deep-seated belief that if you don't do it, it's not going to get done. That has been reinforced by different experiences you've had along the course of your career. That's a cocktail for disaster. Transform.
Wow. You're talking to me when I sat in that chair for a long time. And not only does it hinder staff performance, it hinders board performance as well. And we just say, well, the board won't let me do that. Or this, if I could just get the right staff. If staff was just, I heard someone say this, and I thought, yeah, they said, if staff could just do what's in their job description, I would be happy. And I'm like, no, you don't want someone to do what's in their job description.
That's right.
So it's amazing the depth you have to go to unpack everything that you're talking about. And I'm hoping people hear you and can see themselves and the way they're moving forward in this journey and start to address it. Because in order to get to growth and excellence, you have to start effectively cultivating what you're talking about, that different mindset. So for you, how do you define that growth and excellence in the context of nonprofit organizations? And how can leaders effectively, cultivate these aspects of what you're talking about?
So I think one of the first things I had to recognize is that there's going to always be somebody smarter than me, always somebody more connected than me. There's going to be somebody prettier than me. I'm average to somebody. I'm excellent to somebody else. And so being able to define excellence for myself, thing one, and then thing two, can I articulate that to my team so that they can find their place in that story, that they can find the place where they are CEO of the thing that they do. Many of us don't slow down enough to do that piece. I think that for me, that is super, super important. And then I think I always share with my clients, I start with what is going on at the house. What's going on in your mental, what's going on in your spiritual, what's going on with your finances, what's going on with your body, and what's going on with your people. That 5-star wellness plan, if you are ignoring and neglecting it as a leader, you are demonstrating to your team that that's not important.
Yeah.
And so working on yourself is the first thing I work with my CEOs on. So I start small. Take off 2 hours on Friday. Ooh, you see how you said,
ooh, for some people.
Your whole heart just went up here like this. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I show folks how to have that CEO time for thinking time. Have that time you can walk and talk, whether you need to touch water, you need to touch earth, you need to touch rock, whatever the environment you need to be in that brings you back to source, you've got to be able to touch that as a leader. You have to, because you got to be able to quiet just enough to tap into where you are so you can stay present and not in the weeds of the work. And then I would say really being able to have good counsel.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not just your private kitchen cabinet, but also your professional kitchen cabinet. And making time as a part of your responsibilities. So when I look at a CEO's job description, if I don't see some version of out and about in the community, if I look at your calendar and I don't see some version of gala, breakfast, networking this, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
For the city that you live in, I have problems. I want to talk to you about that. How are you getting out of the weeds and getting up into the big ass strategy if you're not able to maneuver amongst your peers?
Yep.
So notice I didn't say anything about teams yet. Just you.
Right.
Just you. The head has to be healthy. Otherwise it's gonna rot.
Yeah.
And that's where my real focus, pointing towards wellness, well-being, really, really, really started to like grow and take root, because clients around me were on calls with me, Sabrina, coughing, having the flu, looking bedraggled, looking like they need some vitamin D, just not together, and wonderful, beautiful humans. I said, oh no, we got to figure this thing out.
Yeah. I wish that I would have met you again when I sat in that seat, just to share, what you have described was me to a T. And maybe 15 years into a 20-year career, I was brought up by a boomer.
Same.
Right? And not only in the home, but in the workplace.
Yep.
So their idea of success was you get there early, you be the first one to get there, and you're the last one to leave. Yep. That was their idea. And that's how I was trained to be. Yes. And so for me, when I ran my organization, that was my measuring stick for a lot of people and a lot of situations. But what happened for me, and I'm so happy you're here talking about this, is the year that I was retiring, 2018, I already knew I was going to retire. But the year that I was retiring, I got diagnosed with 2 cancers, 2 blood cancers that were brought on by stress. And when you said leave early on a Friday, my heart dropped, because that was never in my head, sitting in that CEO seat, that was never a possibility for me. I would feel guilty if I left at 5 to go to the gym, to start taking care of myself. And I just started doing that 2017. And so if you're hearing this, please hear it. And if you are doing this, break that cycle, please, because what will happen is it will show up as dis-ease in your body.
That's right.
And that's what we're talking about. So for those that are a little skeptical, again, could you discuss a successful case study where transformative leadership impacted an organization's, trajectory, and what were the key strategies that were used?
Sure. So I have a client, they're still a current client, that a few years ago, right at the beginning of the pandemic, they were in a lot of turmoil. They had high attrition. They continued to switch tactics, disguise their strategy. Most of the philanthropic revenue that was coming into the organization came through the founder. And it looked optically like they were very diverse, but the power seat was not. And so people were like, well, I'm going to go. Okay. So I suggested right after the murder of George Floyd, I said, listen, do y'all have some money set aside? And they happened to be an organization that they had a little bit in their coffers. I said, close for weeks. They closed for almost a month. They went to the board. They did the financials with me to say, okay, what would it take for us to close? Because my point was people are exhausted.
Yeah.
And everybody does not want to be here. And we need to be able to reset and recalibrate and give folks the opportunity to choose to be in this messy middle. If they decide coming out of that break, they do not want to come along with here's what our policies, procedures, practices are going to be. Here's the business model, then we're going to package them out and wish them happiness, and they will find where they want to be. But if you decide to stay, here is what must be true. What came out of that was some of the executive leadership left. A lot of the middle line staff left, middle managers left, but the folks who stayed. And they stayed committed and they stayed working through the challenges. And now one of the senior members of that leadership team is now the CEO, just finished her first year. When she's off, she's off. And I have her personal cell phone number. I can, hey, what's the girl, I'm on PTO. Goodbye. Because working on that balance. And for me, your responsibility as a leader in your organization is to create those sort of like gates for your organization. So if you think about bowling, for those of us who have bowled, I didn't know for a long time they had these bumper rails on the side.
Right.
Come up. No matter what you do, that ball is hitting those pins. Well, your responsibility as a CEO, as a leader of your organization, what are the guardrails you have put up to ensure that that ball is going to hit those pins? And one of the ways that I was able to help them see that is modeling. She's off when she's off. When people are getting ready to go out on PTO, they have transition plans. Don't call them. And so forth and so on. Because it was so important for folks to start to believe that it is possible to do your work well and not have to drag that into your family life. And that was really critical to me. And that just happened. It happened over the last 4 years. Wow. And now the organization is continuing to grow, to institutionalize their philanthropy, to diversify their revenue. So we're working on that with them now, and to hire people who want to step into the next challenge they have because it's clear. And that to me is a win-win.
Right. That's a good case study. You did say something that reminded me of this. I did learn this from my boomer. So let me acknowledge this. They said, if you can't leave the office or go to a conference without someone calling you, then have you really done a good job in developing your staff?
There you go.
You should be able to go on PTO and not have the building burned. Nobody should be calling you unless the building is burning down, right? You want confident staff so that you can leave the office. So I did get that from them. So you mentioned diversity. So what role does diversity, equity, and inclusion play in transformative leadership? And how can nonprofits really integrate DEI principles into their organizational strategies?
So I just think at a macro level, it just makes good business sense.
Right.
When you have real intersectionality by things we can measure, not just diversity of thought, but by race and by gender and by orientation and by religious preference and by all the and bys, you're bringing folks different experiences to the table. So 10 years ago, I did not lead with, I'm first gen American. I'm a Caribbean woman. That's how I identify. I am first in family. First girl, oldest girl, first in family to go to college. First in family to own a business. First in family to get a graduate degree. I can keep going on the firsts. That identity comes with some stuff.
Yeah.
So if I'm coming to somebody who is 4 or 5 generations from Cornell, 4 or 5 generations from Howard, and so forth and so on, they're having a different lived experience than I am. And so from a practicality perspective, you've got to have enough folks who've had different lived experiences, because your job really with your mission is to put yourself out of business. And how can you think globally and with innovation at the forefront if all of y'all just looking at each other just doing the same thing? So to me, at that most macro level, that is good business. The challenge that we have now is that we've been getting a lot of lip service across government, across education, across private industry, across larger foundations. You name it, folks are like, are we done yet? Is the coast clear? Can we get our $200 and get out of jail card? So people didn't really believe. And to be quite honest, I don't think some of us really believe. Because let's be clear, although racism is a construct of power, there are lots of us who are anti-Black.
Yeah.
And so when you think about DEI principles, you have got to be willing to be open to difference, to be open to being wrong, to be open to there is actually another way, to be open to the fact that we are actually the global majority.
Yeah.
And that mindset needs to bleed, it needs to show up clearly in vision, period.
Yeah.
Then it needs to be reflected in your policies, your procedures, and your practices. And oftentimes it'll live in a policy somewhere. You could live in a procedure, but practices run organizations.
Yeah.
So that for me is where I want leaders to be front and center. First, get your head right. And then look at your 3 Ps, because that's going to be telling at where you've got to do work to ensure you're able to put your organization in the best position to have deep impact if it's local, widespread impact if it's national or global.
Yeah. Yeah. So 3 Ps: policies, procedures, and practice. Look at them. And that's, yeah, you're preaching, by the way. I haven't said amen, but I have been nodding my head continuously. So yes, I hear you. So everybody is not as articulate or can communicate. They get flustered. So I know that communication is really key in leadership. Yes. But how can nonprofit leaders effectively communicate that vision? And not only communicate it, but communicate it across, stakeholders, like staff and board members and donors and the community. What can they do?
So I think make it plain. So one of the things that I decided very early on in my career is that I was going to speak plain English. Sometimes I'm like your sister girlfriend, and I will use colloquialisms, and I will use Jamaican patois, and I will use whatever I feel like it, because let me tell you what, I have multiple degrees and certificates and designations. So if you want me to pull out my stuff, you got time? So I don't need to prove how educated I am. I don't need to prove how learned I am. What I want to do is make sure that when you sit across from me, you walk away feeling like, damn, I get that. I understand that. I can activate on that one thing. So leaders, we got to get out of the jargon. A test that I always do when I go in and do cultural assessments in organizations, I ask folks to tell me the mission. The amount of, are you going to tell my manager? No, I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell your manager. I go back to leadership and go, hey, this mission's foolish. Okay? It has too many words. It has a comma. It starts a second paragraph. What are we doing right now?
Right.
What is our one-day statement? What is the we will be out of business when? What is the if our organization ceased to exist tomorrow, here is the hole that would exist in our community. Here is the fissure that would happen in the social safety net. If your team members cannot say that with confidence. Too complicated, too much, slim it down. The second thing I would say that I want leaders to make sure they can articulate, if nothing else, what's your big three? Most adult learners cannot memorize more than 3 things. 5 max. 3 is it. Yeah, when I look at goals, why y'all got 13 goals?
Oh, you're not going to get that accomplished. That's not going to happen.
Flip the page. We have moved on from goals to aspirations, friends, and you are not making it. Disappointment is in your future.
Yep.
And so I want folks who are like, gosh, Kishshana, how do I talk about this stuff? Make it plain. My practice is on my kiddo. If that 18-year-old, and I've been doing it since she was little, if she can't understand it when she was little in her little mind and now in her young person's mind, the concept that I am describing to her, too complicated.
Right.
Because quiet as it's kept, lots of us do not read beyond an 8th grade level. That's right. And so we need to be talking to the folks in the room who are not going to tell you, I don't understand. They're just going to tune out. Yes, they work for you. And if speaking is not your jam, you're like, Kishshana, I trip over my words. Sometimes, I get flustered. Good old note cards. Friends, I came here to say 3 things and then note cards, right? Because there's no shame in how. What I want you to feel very confident in is your what and your why, because that is what's going to move your team to take ownership and to want to co-create alongside you in your organization.
Wow. Okay. So I'm going to bring it back to board members only because I know you talked about staff.
Yep.
Make that same conversation to a CEO that's struggling with their board members.
So a lot of times board members and CEOs are struggling because neither of them really know their role. We don't do the basics. This is your life's work. We don't do the one-on-one. I would like everybody to get a one-on-one on what is the responsibilities, roles, and purview of the board of directors versus what is that of the chief executive.
Thank you.
So one of the things I've noticed in terms of communication, particularly from my leaders, is that they don't know what their role is. Quick example, I had a potential client a few months ago who needed coaching. I don't believe that when your executive director or CEO is being recommended for coaching, that they should take it, because you're going to be resentful. Yeah, you're recommended, right?
Yeah, recommended. I haven't heard that term before. Recommended.
That's my mama. She knows what kind of person recommended. So I said to her, well, what is your signing ability? Like, what in your operating revenue do you sign off on without having to go to the board? The answer should really have been a pretty large number relative to her budget size. She didn't even pass $10,000. Oh, no. So thing one, being able to understand that your job as chief executive is to operationalize the mission, and the board's job is to actually set mission. So for all of my founders, at the point that you have a board of directors, your mission no longer belongs to you. Sorry.
Yeah.
And so how can an ED talk to, or CEO talk to their board? It's starting with, here's how I plan to operationalize this mission. Here's where I need your support. As opposed to, what do you think I should do?
Boom.
And it's not about having a rubber stamp board. I don't want people who are not thinking on my board. But it's understanding that your role as a board member is in advisory, it's in your fiduciary responsibility, and it's setting that big S strategy. You're on the hook. And then the chief executive, along with their team, operationalizes that big S strategy.
Yes.
So they've got to be able to have that conversation.
That is so true. Thank you for that. So looking forward, what trends or innovations do you foresee in nonprofit leadership that will continue to drive, let's talk about growth and excellence in this sector?
So we're seeing a lot more social ventures as opposed to like more traditional legacy nonprofit organizations. So social ventures, those organizations that year 0, they have $5. Year 1, they got $2 million. Year 5, they're $20 million organization. And you're like, how did they grow so fast? Because they're looking at philanthropy as capital. And so this has been quietly happening for the last 25 years. But now, particularly because there's been so much emphasis over the last 5 or 6 years around tech and around raising capital and around venture capital, you're starting to see more organizations kind of follow those venture models. So I think that's going to be one of the things we're going to see, particularly as organizations become founded. The second thing I think we're going to see in terms of trends is the use of tech in organizations to accelerate the results and the outcomes. So whereas before you had to have 5 people on staff who did the research and the data collection and evaluation, which is expensive, and the foundation won't give you more money till you have it. Now you can leverage AI and AI assisted tools to help your team members get to that end faster with less upfront outlay of cash to then get the funding that you need down the line. So you're going to see some of that too across every area, across how we think about staff management, how we think about communications and documentation, how we think about how we use fundraising. And we're seeing a lot of that happening now. And then I think the last thing is, I think we're going to see a lot more mergers. I think we're going to see a lot more mergers. And I think that some of the bigger legacy organizations are going to be out of business. Their business models are antiquated. They are not showing up as things that feel like really industry forward. And organizations that are able to pivot and have more of a venture capital, a social capital kind of model, social venture kind of model, coupled with being able to leverage tech, are going to be able to attract a more diversified cadre, if you will, of donor investors, and therefore are going to swallow up the organizations who are doing the same old. So those are 3 things I think are going to be already happening, but I think you're going to start to see a really visible uptick in that.
Wow, that's very interesting because my background is Boys and Girls Clubs, and Boys and Girls Club, exactly what you're saying around mergers is happening. Like, that is what's happening. And some people don't like it, but you know, you got to go with what makes sense for the business brand and for the model. And it's just you either change or get absorbed.
That's right.
That is the bottom line. And so a lot of people are experiencing that. That's very interesting. I'm going to check here and see if we have any questions, and want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to ask questions. I'm working with multiple texts here. So I got comments. So let's see what our comments are saying. They're saying this is so good. Fume said, do you have that process of matching strengths with tasks documented anywhere? And how can we replicate it?
So short answer, yes. This work I do as a part of like big strategy days with clients and teams, particularly when they want to do like fast pivots. And so I don't have anything that's like free and laying around. But the general idea, honestly, is that first you got to start with a strengths assessment, and having somebody who is a qualified certified coach coming in, doesn't have to be me, but somebody who actually knows how to do their work is really, really helpful. And then you got to really know your job descriptions. And job descriptions typically look like long to-do lists. And one of the first exercises I do before we can do that matching is rip them darn things up. Or I will tear through them. Mm-hmm. That is a task. That's a task. That's a task. That's not a responsibility. So getting clear on responsibilities versus tasks to be able to align them to folks' actual strengths, and then some working agreements on your team. I know this is not my job, but I'm taking this on because I can do it in 32 seconds flat, and it's going to take Sabrina 3 hours. She needs those 2 hours and 59 and a half minutes to go do these other things over here that she's amazing at. So that's kind of how, that's sort of like at a highest level, like process wise, but typically I walk clients through that. And we have some documents that we use to do that.
And so once you have identified what people's strengths are, how do you incorporate that into not just aligning their job functions, but how do you have that conversation about somebody asking about the bus? So I know where their mind is going. How do you have that conversation around who's on the bus, what seat they are on the bus? What does that look like?
So it depends on what purview I'm coming in from. So if I come in as a coach, I've already pulled your job descriptions. I've already done an individual and a team grid. So I can see where folks or where the strength themes are actually living. I ask a ton of questions about how people work. I look at people's calendars. I am nosy, y'all. So I get all in your business. And then typically I create an individual development plan that walks alongside career pathways for the organization. Lots of organizations don't actually have career pathways. And so we might have to pause at that point and go, are we doing that? Are we not doing that? And then design from there. Then I always encourage organizations to keep your coach for a few months after. So there's not this fun thing you did one time at band camp. And so I will have office hours with team members each week, looking at their work plans if they have, helping them figure out how to create one if they don't, so that they're able to go, okay, well, talk to me about how your strengths were in overdrive. They were doing the most. How did you know? So that team members start to go, oh, when Kishshana starts boom, 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 with ideas, she's ready to rock and roll. That means we haven't done enough prep for her to keep her focused. So as opposed to being like, gosh, she is always overwhelming us with all these ideas. It's like, oh, when she starts doing that, we already know what didn't occur already. So that's kind of how I help folks to see how to use it in real life, but it always walks alongside an individual development plan. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I don't want anybody to get discouraged, right?
No.
We all are in this growth pattern, and that is why you are here, right? And so take advantage of these opportunities to say, how can I grow and make my organization better? So I don't see any more questions at this time. So Kishshana, I want to be able to, first of all, let me tell the people, if you have any question around engaging your board and fundraising, that's something that I can help you with. And you just go to my website at www.supportingworldhope.com to check out my services. But what I want to offer you is I want you to get the last word in, the final words, and let people know how they can get in contact with you.
Absolutely. So KishshanaPalmer.com is the easiest way to reach me personally for coaching, for speaking, and it's KISHSHANAPALMER.com. So really straightforward. For some really just easy bites, my name is Kishshana Palmer on all socials. So if you look on YouTube, you'll see tons of videos I've done for leaders and folks who manage people, bite size, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 9 minutes, the longest, on how to show up powerfully for your team and how to start taking some of the principles that we've talked about today and really actioning them in your organization where you are right now. And then lastly, I'll say, I'm turning in the final edits today, Sabrina, but my book is up and ready for pre-sale. Hallelujah. Wiley, shout out to my publisher. Busy is a 4-letter word. A guide to achieving more by doing less. Coming from a recovering workaholic. Hello, friends. And you can order that on Amazon or on my website. So those are kind of like the ways. And if you want to talk about how my team can come in, obviously go to management.co and we'd be happy to chat. So super excited.
So do you have a link for the pre-order of the book that I can perhaps share?
Of course, just KishshanaPalmer.com/book.
Okay, perfect. I will make sure that I drop that link because that is actually a great title. And I start trying to use the word busy and use the word productive, but I need to read your book. That type A personality just be hammering on me all sorts of ways. So that is awesome. And so with that, I went over 5 minutes. I promised like a 45-minute engagement, but this was an awesome conversation. And I do want to leave you with this. Your mission matters and deserves to be highlighted in your community. Your mission matters and can be an inspiration to those who need it the most. Your mission matters and deserves to be funded to its full capacity. And that's Sipping Tea with Sabrina. See you next time. Y'all be blessed. Bye-bye.
Be blessed, y'all.